captain to the forward cabin immediately right now." Rachel Turner's voice trembled through the intercom, half a tone higher than usual, snapping the entire first-class cabin of Flight SkyWest 2190 into absolute silence. The clink of crystal glasses, the soft background music, the quiet hum of reclining seats, everything seemed to switch off at once. In that tense violin-string silence, Jonathan Reed remained seated in 2A. He leaned back. Seatbelt fastened the Longines watch on his left wrist, catching the warm, golden light of the premium cabin. The screen of his phone still glowed on the tray table, displaying a message. "Legal team, everything is ready, sir. We only await your signal." Jonathan did not reply immediately. His thumb brushed the edge of the screen, then paused. He could hear his own heartbeat, steady and unhurried, unnervingly calm, especially compared to the panic spreading through Rachel's mind. At the front of the cabin, 34-year-old Rachel Turner inhaled deeply, but still felt short of breath. She tried to keep her trained service smile in place, though her lips trembled. She knew that the moment she pressed the captain call button, there was no going back. Passengers would complain, schedules would slip, paperwork would pile up. But none of that frightened her as much as the calm gaze of the man in 2. A patient unbothered, as if he were the one waiting for her. "Sir, you are holding up the entire flight," Rachel said, forcing firmness into her voice. "If you refuse to cooperate, we will have to ask you to exit the aircraft for further processing." Jonathan looked up. His dark brown eyes did not raise, their voice did not protest. They simply looked straight into hers, peeling through every layer of excuse. "The captain is coming," he said slowly. "I will speak directly with him." Rachel's service smile cracked. A shiver ran down her spine. That kind of calmness did not belong to someone afraid of being removed from a flight. In seat 1, C-45-year-old business traveler Evan Patterson raised an eyebrow above his laptop. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, frozen mid-email. Part irritation, part curiosity. He had flown first class hundreds of times. He had seen drunk passengers, quarrels over overhead bins, even full-blown arguments. But a man sitting silently causing no disturbance, yet somehow stopping the entire flight, that was strange. In 3B, Olivia Carter, a 26-year-old independent journalist with hastily tied curls and a simple grey hoodie, tilted her head, observing. She had seen this scene too many times in her reporting on discrimination. The way Rachel had cheerfully poured champagne for Patterson, but looked at 2A with caution instead of service. The way Mark appeared from the back, not so coincidentally. She sensed something in the air, something never written in any airline manual, but operating smoothly through every glance, every question. How far will they push it this time? She wondered, fingers brushing her phone inside her pocket. 12 minutes earlier, the cabin had been peaceful. The distant rumble of aircraft wheels, a soft chime from the speakers, the faint scent of bergamot from warm towels. Rachel pushed the service cart to the front, her rehearsed smile bright. "Welcome aboard SkyWest 219, 0 to San Diego, Mr. Patterson. Would you like champagne or sparkling water?" Patterson blinked away from his screen and waved lightly. "Champagne, please." Rachel poured smoothly, chatted about the weather, earned a polite laugh. Everything picture perfect. Until she turned to seat 2A. The smile on her lips dimmed, half a degree, almost imperceptible, except to herself. The man in 2A was a black man in his early 50s, navy suit, white shirt, no tie. Not carrying luxury bags, not wearing flashy gold watches, no open laptop with corporate slides, just an old worn briefcase. "Sir, I need to verify your boarding pass," Rachel said, her voice smaller but firmer. Jonathan nodded, showing no surprise. "Of course." He unlocked his phone, swiped twice, and held it up. The QR code was clear. SkyWest 219, 1st class, seat 2A Reed, Jonathan. Rachel stared too long. "Where did you purchase this ticket, sir?" The question slipped out, not from protocol, but from something deeper, a mix of instinct bias and an uneasy sense that something felt off. Through the airline's app, Jonathan answered evenly. "Is something wrong? No. I just need to recheck," Rachel said, pulling out her tablet and tapping harder than necessary. From the back, 29-year-old Mark Ellison walked up a new first-class attendant with an undercut and a normally friendly smile that now felt stiff. "Everything all right, Rachel?" Not sure she murmured loud enough for Jonathan to hear. "The ticket looks unusual. I want to confirm it's legitimate." Mark turned to Jonathan, the service smile snapping on like a trained reflex. "Sir, do you have an ID? We just need to match the name." Jonathan handed over his California driver's license. Mark held it up under the cabin light, rotating it like a security officer, even though this was just a commercial flight. "Reed Jonathan A.," he read aloud. "What do you do for a living, Mr. Reed?" That question belonged to no checklist, but it belonged to something else, ingrained bias. The need to explain why someone like him would sit here. "I work in the aviation industry," Jonathan said, meeting his eyes. True, but incomplete. Mark stared a moment longer, then exchanged a quick look with Rachel. Their eyes spoke a silent language never written in official reports. He does not fit. Something is off. Check more. In 3B, Olivia had noticed from the moment he was asked, "What do you do?" She had covered stories of lounge profiling, extra screening at business class gates, subtle interrogations. Each phrase, each glance, each unnecessary question built a chillingly familiar pattern. The story was repeating, right before her eyes. She inhaled palms warming with tension. Her fingers brushed her phone. Not yet, she told herself. Wait. See how far they go. In the galley, Rachel paced anxiously. Her tablet displayed status platinum executive, multiple first-class bookings, recent high miles usage. Something is wrong, she whispered. This account uses miles constantly. He might be using someone else's. Mark frowned. Or he's just a frequent flyer. Look at him. Mark, Rachel snapped quietly. Old suitcase. No signs of frequent first-class passengers don't look like that. Was the anchor of prejudice, the tug pulling others into agreement, so biased felt justified. Outside, Jonathan placed his phone screen up on the tray. A single touch, and the recording icon blinked red. Every breath, every excuse phrased as protocol would now exist as audio proof. He listened to the Air Vents magazine pages, scattered whispers. He had heard these sounds all his life, on planes, in banks, in hotels. The language changed, the accents changed, but one thing stayed constant. They always shifted when people saw his skin color. The second hand of his Longines ticked steadily. 14 minutes until scheduled departure. The aircraft was still motionless. Passengers fidgeted, checked their watches, messaged relatives about delays. In 1C, Patterson grew increasingly annoyed. He caught fragments about ticket issues and account verification. To him, the math was simple. One man was delaying everyone else enough to make him feel superior without saying it aloud. If you cannot afford first class, do not fly first class, he thought. In 5A, a middle-aged woman hugged her bag, avoiding looking at 2A. She did not dislike the man. She simply wanted no trouble. Self-preservation was stronger than discomfort. Only Olivia looked straight at him. She caught Jonathan's eyes for a brief second. There was no pleading, no anger, only waiting. Waiting for what she wondered. Justice, or the inevitable moment he seemed to anticipate. Jonathan gave the slightest nod. Barely noticeable. Yet Olivia understood. He knows I see him. He wants me to see, to remember. The red dot on his phone pulsed steadily. The message from the legal team remained unanswered. Outside the jet bridge, the autumn sun of Colorado glinted off the fuselage of the Boeing 737 with the Sky West logo. Inside, surrounded by suspicion, impatience, and avoidance, one man in seat 2. A sat upright, seatbelt fastened, wrapped in an unsettling calm, like an invisible shield. They saw a black passenger who did not look like a frequent first-class flyer. They thought they were judging him. But Jonathan knew better. He was judging them. And this moment the system believed it held power, was merely the opening scene of a truth no one on Sky West 2190 was prepared to face. The first-class galley of Sky West 2190 was small, but at this moment it felt as if the walls were closing in around Rachel Turner. She leaned against the equipment cabinet, gripping the tablet so tightly her knuckles turned white. The lines on the screen stayed unchanged, refusing to disappear. Platinum executive, recent high-mileage usage, multiple first-class bookings. It was not a warning. There was no red icon, no phrase saying fraud alert. But to Rachel, it suggested one thing, something not normal. Mark Ellison stood behind her with his arms crossed, peering over her shoulder, as if trying to see deeper into the screen or deeper into the swelling unease in her chest. Maybe he is just a frequent business traveler, Mark said, though even he did not sound convinced. Rachel whipped around. Mark, do you think that passenger looks like a business traveler? Mark stayed silent. He did not want to say what he actually thought, but Rachel's eyes said the rest. We both know the answer. In that moment, they were no longer two trained professionals. They were two people desperately trying to justify a chain of instinctive reactions wrapped in the word protocol. He does not have a fancy suitcase, no priority tags, no expensive watch, Rachel whispered, as if reassuring herself. Mark, look at that old, worn briefcase. Who buys a first-class ticket and carries that? Mark exhaled. But he has a valid ID. Rachel bit her lip. I still feel something is off. Mark studied her. Is it because he is? Rachel cut him off instantly, as if she could hear the second half of the sentence forming. Do not say that. I just doubt the system, that is all. Doubting the system, the safest explanation, always reasonable, and always capable of hiding an entire nest of truths no one wanted to confront. Outside, the tension inside the cabin grew heavier. Jonathan Reed leaned back in seat 2, eyes fixed on the empty space ahead of him, not because he was figuring out what to do, but because he was remembering. Remembering the questions, like, are you sure your ticket is business class, back in the year, Mot Chin Chin Bon? Remembering the eyes of security guards at the gate when he was a young engineer at his former airline. Remembering work trips where he was pulled aside into the row designated for suspicious passengers during random checks. People often told him, do not take it personally, but when it happens for 3 decades, it is no longer an incident. It becomes a pattern, a structure, something invisible yet durable as metal. Jonathan opened his eyes and glanced at his phone, still recording the red dot, blinking steady and calm, unlike the heartbeat of many others in the cabin. In seat 1, C. Patterson had nearly finished his second glass of champagne. He shook his head, openly irritated. "This is ridiculous," he muttered loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Some people do not prepare properly, then delay the entire aircraft. Unbelievable." The woman in 5A nodded. "I hope they resolve it soon." Jonathan heard every word, each one falling like small pebbles piling up over time. The galley door opened. Rachel stepped out with forced determination, although her hand trembled slightly. Mark followed her like a shadow. They stopped beside seat 2A. "Mr. Reed," Rachel began, her voice strained with false composure. "We need additional verification. Your miles account shows unusual activity." Jonathan studied her. "What qualifies as unusual?" Rachel froze for half a second. She had not prepared for that question. "Using miles continuously over a short period. Does the airline have a policy against frequent flying?" Jonathan asked calmly. Mark jumped in quickly. "Not a policy against it. We just have to ensure that I am not someone else." Jonathan finished his sentence for him. "Or that I am not using someone's account." The air hardened. Rachel swallowed. In row 3, B. Olivia lifted her phone and started live streaming publicly. The words, "Live moi hai." Viewers appeared, then climbed moi tam hai sao number. She whispered into her mic. "This is following a very familiar pattern. A black passenger, being held back, asked questions. Others are not asked. Let us see where this goes." Mark took a deep breath. "Mr. Reed, we are simply following protocol. If you cooperate." "Which protocol?" Jonathan tilted his head slightly. "I have heard this phrase many times. Every version sounds the same: protocol that requires me to prove I am not committing fraud. I want to ask, does your protocol require it for every first-class passenger?" Rachel flushed. "It is not because you—" Jonathan looked directly at her. "How am I different from the passenger in seat 1C?" The question cut through her defenses like a drill. Patterson heard it, frowned, and almost said something but stopped. Rachel stumbled over her words. "We are only following internal procedure." "And does that procedure apply only to me?" Jonathan asked. "Or to people who look like me?" Silence dropped like a weight. Mark froze as if someone had pressed pause on him. On Olivia's live stream, comments popped up rapidly. "Here we go again. This is so familiar. Let's see how far they push it." Rachel could not endure the prolonged silence. She swallowed hard, then said the sentence that would destroy her career in less than 1 hour. "You do not look like someone who flies first class often." A passenger gasped. Another turned to look. Patterson raised his eyebrows, surprised despite trying not to show it. Jonathan closed his eyes for a second, not from anger, but from exhaustion. The exhaustion of watching the same cycle repeat itself too many times. When he opened them, something had changed. His gaze sharpened heavier, as if a door inside him had just opened. "Thank you for your honesty," Jonathan said calmly. "I think we have reached clarity." He picked up his phone and turned the screen towards them. The blinking red recording light reflected off their faces. "And I have recorded everything." Rachel stepped back half a pace. Mark's face drained of color. At the rear of the cabin, Olivia whispered into her live stream, her voice trembling with outrage, and with the sense that she was witnessing something far bigger than a simple discrimination case. "This is not small anymore. This man there is something different about him. He is not panicking, not arguing, not explaining. He is waiting for them to dig deeper." She zoomed in on Jonathan. "And I think they are about to fall into the hole they are digging." In seat 2, Jonathan simply adjusted his seatbelt. His hand did not shake, but in his eyes there was a light that was hard to describe. Not fear, not anger, not defiance, but absolute certainty. The certainty of a man who knew one thing with complete clarity, that this game was not played by their rules. It was played by his. Every piece moved exactly where he intended. The SkyWest 2190 flight was supposed to depart the gate at 10:35 in the morning, but the hands of the clock had already moved to 10:48, then 10:52. No engines, no pushback, no clear announcement. That silence, the kind that only exists in the moments before a storm breaks, spread through the first-class cabin like a thin but suffocating fog. In seat 2, Jonathan Reed leaned back with one hand resting lightly on his phone, his eyes drifting toward the window. He showed no expression, yet there was a depth in his gaze that revealed he was counting every passing minute, as if each delay fit perfectly into a map only he understood. In seat 1, C. Patterson checked his watch for the 8th time in 5 minutes. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "I have a meeting at 2. I am not sitting here watching them examine a perfectly valid ticket for half an hour." His voice was not loud, yet it created a domino effect. A man in 4A looked up and frowned. A woman in 5C shifted irritably as she rearranged her bag as if the rustling alone could speed things up. Discomfort rippled through the cabin like an underwater current. A sigh here, a grumble there, a heavy shake of a head. No one said it out loud, but the shared thought hung heavily in the air. "That passenger is delaying the entire flight." No, the thing they thought was never just that passenger. The thing they thought was a black man is delaying the entire flight. Jonathan knew. He had known it before they even realized they were thinking it. In the galley, Rachel Turner twisted the tablet in her hands, like a tarot card that could predict her future. "Mark, have you called the flight manager?" she asked, voice tight. "Yes, they are coming," Mark said, though not nearly as confidently as she hoped. Rachel bit her lip. "If that ticket is fake, or if he is using someone else's miles, and we did not catch it immediately, we will be held responsible." Mark shook his head. "But what if it is legitimate?" Rachel froze. That moment exposed the truth she did not dare speak out loud. She did not want that possibility to be true. Because if the ticket was legitimate, everything she had done, the baseless suspicion, the ID scrutiny, the interrogation would no longer be called protocol, but prejudice. And her 12-year career built on a polished image would crack open. Mark swallowed. "Rachel, if we are wrong, no." "I am not wrong," she snapped softly. "I am following professional instinct. He does not look like a first-class passenger." That was the moment Mark realized they had gone too far. But he could not pull back either. Rachel was someone he admired, someone he trusted. And sometimes people would rather trust a colleague who is wrong than admit they themselves are doing something not right. In seat 2, Jonathan unlocked his phone and typed a simple message: "Phase 2, crew stalling documentation in progress." Then he sent it. No noise, no dramatic gestures, just a single tap on the screen. But that tap was the signal that stirred a machine far larger than anyone in the cabin could imagine. He placed the phone back on the tray table and subtly angled the screen toward Rachel and Mark, not as a challenge, not as a threat, just enough for them to notice that he was communicating with someone. Normal passengers did not call when having trouble on a flight. In seat 3, B. Olivia Carter held her camera low, so only the scene ahead appeared on screen. The live icon on Instagram blinked. 20 viewers. 30. Nam moi be. Mot tram hai moi hai. Comments flooded in. What's happening? Profiling again. Record everything, nice angle, girl, Olivia whispered. A black passenger is being held because they suspect his ticket is invalid, even though he has shown all documents. I will keep recording. Jonathan's expression did not change, but he tilted his head just half a second, toward Olivia, subtle and unmistakable. A silent message. Keep going. At 10:59 in the morning, the delay reached 24 minutes. A passenger snapped, "Are we leaving or not?" Rachel heard it clearly. Her heart tightened. Each passing second felt like someone was pouring more sand into a bag that had already begun to tear. Mark was sweating. He looked toward Jonathan, still sitting, perfectly calm, almost statue-like, and suddenly felt a chill. Not because Jonathan was causing trouble, not because he was arguing, but because he was too calm. No one understood that his calmness was not submission. It was observation, evaluation, recording. Jonathan was not passive. He was collecting data that would later become evidence powerful enough to shatter a few careers. The aircraft door opened. Heavy footsteps echoed through the cabin, each one a punctuation mark in the unfolding disaster. David Halverson, 48 years old flight operations manager, known for his rules, a rules attitude, stepped inside. His eyes immediately scanned for Jonathan, scanning for a problem. And when his eyes landed on Jonathan, the message was clear. The problem is you. Mark felt his throat tighten. Rachel straightened her back, trying to hide the trembling in her fingers. David approached seat 2A. No greeting, no introduction, no courtesy. "Are you Jonathan Reed?" he asked sharply. Jonathan looked up. "Yes. I need you to leave the aircraft immediately." No explanation, no evidence, no security protocol. Just a command that sounded like expulsion. The entire cabin stopped breathing. Olivia captured every second. The number of live-stream viewers jumped to Sautrum in 5 seconds. Jonathan lifted his phone calmly, without haste. He turned the screen toward David, revealing the newest incoming message. "Legal standby, activated, proceed." No one understood what that meant, but its shadow settled over the cabin like a warning. David did not know. Rachel did not know. Mark did not know. But Jonathan knew. He knew they had just stepped directly into the trap he had set 6 months ago. A trap they believed belonged to protocol, when in reality, it belonged to him. David Halverson stood firm in front of seat 2A authority, radiating from his deep navy uniform and polished nameplate. Within the airline, he was known as the rule enforcement machine, but the man sitting before him was not a typical passenger. He was a black man whose unnervingly calm demeanor unsettled David in a way he could not name. "Mr. Reed," David said, his voice metallic cold, "I am ordering you to leave the aircraft. Now. Immediately." The entire cabin stretched taut like an invisible wire. Patterson in 1C froze mid-keystroke. The woman in 5A clutched her purse tighter. In 3B, Olivia Carter lifted her phone, closer, her live stream climbing toward 900 viewers. Jonathan looked up, his gaze unshaken by the commanding tone. "I understand what you are asking," he replied slowly, "but I have not heard a valid reason." David clenched his jaw, masking his hesitation behind clipped authority. "We suspect your ticket is not valid, based on what Jonathan asked instantly. No anger, no argument, just the question of a man accustomed to confronting truths others try to bury." Rachel's palms were damp with sweat. Mark stood behind her, so unsure he could barely lift his eyes from the floor. David glanced sideways, searching for support. Rachel opened her mouth, but her throat locked. Mark was forced to step in. "We noticed your Miles account had heavy activity in a short time." Jonathan nodded slightly, as though he had heard this exact excuse hundreds of times. "Flying often is a problem," he asked. "Or is the problem that I am the one flying often?" Mark fell silent. A flush of heat spread across Rachel's face. The question sliced through every layer of justification. David fought to reclaim control. "This is a security concern. We cannot continue the flight while there is doubt." Jonathan did not laugh, but his eyes narrowed, not with irritation, but with disappointment. "I provided the ticket, the ID. The names match. No one has called security to verify. So where exactly does this doubt come from?" He paused. From protocol or from personal assumption? No one answered. The silence became the real storyteller, and its story was far from flattering. In row 3, B. Olivia whispered into her live stream, "They have no evidence, and this man knows it." David exhaled sharply, fists curling. It had been a long time since anyone cornered him like this. "You are disrupting the flight," he said, clinging to the last thread of authority. "If you refuse to leave, I will call security. They will remove you." Patterson let out a frustrated, "Oh my God," but stopped abruptly when Jonathan smiled. Not a gentle smile, not a mocking one. The smile of someone who had just heard exactly what he wanted. Jonathan picked up his phone. The screen lit up. The recording icon blinked red. He turned it toward them. "I have been recording since the moment you began asking questions unrelated to protocol, and I will keep recording." He leaned back, voice level like a clean blade. "I will also record when security arrives." Mark's face drained of color. Rachel stumbled over her own breath. David flushed as though someone had slapped him. You cannot," Rachel stammered. "Perfectly legal," Jonathan interrupted. "When I detect discrimination or abuse of authority on a commercial flight, I have the right to record to protect myself." Hearing the law recited back at him, David wavered for the first time. Jonathan delivered the next line, like the final nail in their silence. "And I have another camera." He glanced toward Olivia, who was live streaming to more than 1,500 viewers. Rachel's knuckles whitened as she gripped the service cart. Mark swallowed hard. David felt the situation slipping beyond his control, but instead of backing down, he did what many men cornered by their own pride do. He escalated. David pressed his radio. "Security to Gate Bravo 7. We have a non-compliant passenger." His voice echoed not just through the radio, but through the entire cabin like a verdict. Jonathan simply looked at him, his eyes deep and steady as stone beneath water. He placed his phone gently on the tray table, not making a sound. "Good," he said softly. "I want security to come." David frowned. "What are you planning to do?" Jonathan tilted his head slightly, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. "I want everything handled transparently, with witnesses and cameras and an independent party present." He paused, then delivered a line that sent a cold shock down Rachel's spine. "This is not about a ticket. This is about a system." A new message appeared on Jonathan's screen. He glanced at it. "Legal team phase 3, ready. Wait for security." Jonathan rotated the phone so they could see. Just 3 seconds. Long enough for Rachel's heart to drop when she read the words, "Legal team." No one knew who Jonathan was. No one understood why he was so calm. No one realized that his silence was not powerlessness. It was the confidence of a man waiting for the exact moment to turn the entire situation upside down. David inhaled sharply, trying to swallow the rising dread. But it was too late. Jonathan lifted his gaze, meeting David's eyes with a smile Rachel would remember forever. "Mr. Halverson, I suggest you remember everything you just said, and did." He murmured, his voice, quiet, but sharper than a honed blade. "Because in just a moment, you will need to explain every detail." The cabin thickened with tense silence. No one breathed deeply. No one spoke. And then, like the first crack of thunder, before a storm-hurried footsteps echoed from the aircraft door, security had arrived, and the balance of power was about to shift. The rapid footsteps echoing from the aircraft door sounded like battle drums. Passengers turned their heads in unison, the air so heavy it felt as if it could be torn apart. 2 airport security officers entered the cabin. Officer Jessica Mitchell, with a strong build and a professional yet fair gaze, followed by Officer Hall, whose hand rested near his radio out of ingrained habit. They did not know they were walking into the opening act of a storm. But Jonathan knew. "Hello," Officer Mitchell said calmly. "Who reported the passenger issue?" David Halverson stepped forward immediately, as if he were the undisputed authority in the room. "I did." This man, he pointed directly at Jonathan, refused to leave the aircraft when instructed. His ticket shows irregularities. Jonathan did not move, did not react. He simply looked at Mitchell, the look of someone who had seen too many repetitions of the same story. Mitchell nodded. "All right. I need to see your boarding pass and ID." Jonathan handed both over without a single complaint. Mitchell used her handheld scanner, lifting the QR code into the cool blue light. Beep. A short, decisive sound. She looked at her device. Her eyebrows lifted slightly, not out of surprise, but because this was simple. Too simple. "Valid ticket," Mitchell announced clearly. "First class, seat 2A, name matches the ID, platinum executive account." The entire cabin froze. Rachel swallowed hard. Mark took a small step back. David stood stiffly, his face unmoving, though his throat twitched. Mitchell turned to him, her tone shifting from neutral to ice-cold. "Now I need you to explain what exactly is the problem." David grasped at the sinking raft. His miles account had high usage in a short period. He might not be the account owner. Mitchell looked back at Jonathan. "Would you like to respond?" Jonathan nodded gently. "I purchased the ticket with my account. I travel frequently for work." Mitchell turned back to David, her eyes sharp as a blade. "Do you have any evidence this ticket is invalid? Any red flags in the system? Any fraud alerts? Any indicators that require security intervention?" David opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "No, no, no." Mitchell stared at him, this time with zero patience. "Then why was he delayed for 25 minutes?" Rachel stuttered. Because he... And that was when she made the fatal mistake. Because he does not look like someone who flies first class. The cabin erupted. Olivia raised her phone higher. Her live stream shot past 3,000 viewers in seconds. Mitchell snapped toward Rachel as if struck. Her face tightened like a drawn bowstring. "What did you just say?" Mitchell asked, her voice low and dangerous. Rachel turned pale, her lips trembling. I did not. I only..." "You said, 'does not look like someone who flies first class.'" Mitchell repeated word for word. "Explain that." Mark jumped in desperately. "She just meant he did not look like a frequent." Mitchell lifted a hand sharply. "I was not asking you." Rachel stepped back half a pace, as if each movement took her closer to a cliff edge. I had a feeling something was off, she whispered. Off in what way? Mitchell pressed. In the ticket, in the paperwork, or in his appearance? A painful silence followed. Rachel lowered her head, unable to admit it, unable to deny it. Mitchell inhaled deeply, then turned to David. Let me state the actual procedure, she said, each word like a hammer striking iron. This passenger has a valid ticket, valid ID, a valid account, and no signs of fraud. If you ask me to remove him for vague reasons, I will document this as profiling. Jonathan never took his eyes off them. No anger, no hostility. Just a man watching a system trap itself. In seat 6, a Marcus Brown, who had been silent until now, suddenly stood up. Tall, black, powerful like a bronze statue, his voice carried the weight of someone who had endured far too much. I want to know, Marcus said, if I am next. David startled. No one said that. Marcus did not blink. I fly first class every month. I have the same skin color he does. Should I expect my account to be questioned next for being unusual? A few passengers exhaled sharply. A few others applauded softly. Mitchell nodded toward Marcus, acknowledging him with understanding and empathy. Jonathan looked at Marcus, a small nod. No words, but the meaning was clear. Thank you for standing up. The turning point arrived. In his desperation, David threw his final card. You are being disruptive. I will call the captain. And the captain will decide. Jonathan nodded slightly, a thin smile cutting across his face like a blade. Very well. Call the captain. You will be removed from this aircraft, David snapped. Possibly, Jonathan replied. But before that happens, you should remember everything is being recorded. David stepped back, not yet grasping what it meant. Not understanding that Jonathan was not being pulled into their trap. They were walking deeper into the trap he had prepared for the past 6 months. The cockpit door swung open. Captain James Whitmore stepped out, his eyes hard as granite. The entire cabin held its breath. What is going on here? He growled, and the game entered its next phase. Captain James Whitmore stepped out of the cockpit with the force of a commander, jolted awake in the middle of battle. At 58 years old, with 3 decades of flight experience, his cold grey eyes were the kind that made flight attendants straighten their posture the moment he appeared. But today what awaited him was not a technical issue or an unruly passenger. Today what awaited him was the truth exposing a system he had long been the symbol of. What is going on here? Whitmore's voice cracked like thunder, shaking the entire cabin. Officer Mitchell turned toward him, but Jonathan spoke first, calm to a frightening degree. They claim my ticket is invalid, even though the scan confirms it is valid. They are trying to remove me from the plane without providing any evidence. Whitmore looked Jonathan up and down, just as David had done, just as Rachel had done, with that same evaluating, judging stare, full of bias and unwarranted confidence. Then he said the sentence that the airline would later use in their things: "You must never say to passengers training, if the crew gives an order, you comply." I do not care whether you think you are right, Jonathan asked plainly, based on which policy Whitmore stepped closer. Based on my authority. The cabin chilled instantly. Patterson in seat 1C straightened like he was watching an execution. Olivia adjusted her camera, her live stream climbing to 5,300 viewers. Officer Mitchell frowned. Captain, I scanned the ticket. It is valid. The ID is valid. There is no security violation. Whitmore did not even look at her. Security is not the issue. Discipline is the issue. Jonathan tilted his head. So you are saying I am violating discipline by sitting in the correct seat with a valid ticket? Someone in 5C let out a quiet laugh before their spouse elbowed them to stay quiet. Whitmore did not appreciate being mocked. His face flushed, red veins rising on his neck. You will leave this aircraft, he growled, voice sinking like lead. If you do not, I will place you on the no-fly list. The cabin exploded in whispers. The no-fly list. A national ban. A punishment that was not just severe, but life-destroying. Olivia nearly dropped her phone. Oh my God, she breathed as the live stream flooded with shocked comments. No-fly. This captain is insane. Who is that guy? Record everything. And Jonathan, he did not move, did not fear, did not flinch. He simply looked at Whitmore with the gaze of a man who had predicted every move. You are threatening me with the harshest penalty in aviation. Jonathan lowered his voice, without any legal justification. The justification, Whitmore snapped, is that you are resisting the crew. Or, Jonathan answered quietly, eyes locked onto his, the crew is resisting me. In that moment, the power shift tilted 5 degrees, just slightly, but dangerously. Whitmore leaned forward. This is my aircraft. I decide who flies. Do you understand? Jonathan met his eyes, then smiled. A short, thin smile, sharp as a cut. Mr. Whitmore, he said, that is the first interesting thing you have said. The entire cabin froze. That smile, that tone, they did not belong to a regular passenger. Patterson whispered, he knows this kind of power. Marcus Brown in 6. A nodded. He is not ordinary. Officer Mitchell turned to Whitmore, her voice tense. Captain, we cannot threaten a no-fly list without a legitimate cause. Do not instruct me, Whitmore barked. I am the highest authority on this aircraft. Jonathan closed his eyes for a single second. 1 second. But when he opened them again, his voice had changed. Lower, heavier, carrying an invisible force behind every word. Mr. Whitmore, he began slowly. Let me make something very clear to you. He leaned forward slightly. Your authority is not as absolute as you believe. And I assure you, you are about to learn that. Whitmore scoffed. Are you threatening me? Who do you think you are? Jonathan did not answer. He simply lifted his phone and typed a short message. Olivia's live stream captured it perfectly. Phase 4. Captain threatening no-fly list. Proceed. Inside the cockpit, Whitmore's own tablet buzzed 3 times. Annoyed, he pulled it out and opened the screen. And then he froze. His face drained of color, turning pale as if he had seen a ghost. His eyes scanned the message once, then twice, then a 3rd time. The entire cabin held its breath, every gaze locked onto him. Officer Mitchell stepped closer. Captain, is there a problem? Whitmore did not respond. His hand was visibly trembling. Jonathan watched him, not triumphant, not smug, simply confirming that the outcome had landed exactly where it was meant to. Olivia zoomed in on Whitmore's face. Her live stream shot past 8,000 viewers. Only when Rachel whispered, Captain, did Whitmore finally speak. Voice cracked. I need to verify this. Jonathan leaned back and folded his arms. His voice was soft, but it rang through the cabin like a midnight bell. Yes, I think you should. In the cabin, no one understood what had just happened. No one understood why the captain, the highest authority on the plane, was suddenly shaken. No one understood why Jonathan was so calm. They did not yet realize that the truth was standing at the door. And beyond that door, power was about to change hands. Captain James Whitmore stood frozen in the aisle, gripping his tablet as if clinging to a rock in the middle of a storm. The glow from the screen washed over his face, revealing a dramatic shift in expression from authority to confusion, then to fear. Rachel saw his trembling hand, and in that instant she felt the floor slipping beneath her feet. Olivia's live stream surged past, moimoting in viewers' comments, flying too quickly for anyone to read, while the cabin itself remained dead silent, as if everyone were trapped inside a sealed room where a massive secret was about to explode. Captain Officer Mitchell asked quietly, her tone no longer cautious, but firm. "Is that information from operations Whitmore tried to swallow?" But his voice emerged hoarse and strangled. I need to verify this." He turned and hurried into the cockpit, but before the door closed, his panicked voice carried clearly into the cabin, not out of intention, but because he was too shaken to remember. Sound traveled easily. "Dispatch. This is Captain Whitmore of Flight 219. 0. I just received an email from the legal team. Please confirm the information about passenger 2A. Is it true?" A few seconds of silence followed long enough for everyone to hold their breath. Then came the voice of Elizabeth Harmon, Chief Flight Operations Director, sharp as a scalpel. "Captain Whitmore, I confirm the information is 100% accurate. Passenger in seat 2, a Jonathan Reed, is the chairman of the board of SkyWest Aviation. He is conducting an undercover compliance audit authorized directly by the CEO and the legal department." The cabin erupted in a silent shockwave. No one could speak. Rachel collapsed into the nearest seat, hand over her mouth. Mark leaned against the wall, eyes unfocused. Patterson in 1C stammered, "Chairman." Olivia lifted her phone closer, barely breathing, as her live stream shot to Moi Bon Yin Batram viewers. In the cockpit, Elizabeth's voice continued each sentence like a hammer striking steel. "We have been monitoring the situation through the cabin cameras and passenger live stream. All actions by the crew are temporarily suspended, pending further instructions. Captain Whitmore, your threat to place the chairman on the no-fly list is a severe violation of company policy." The cockpit door closed, but the echo of that conversation pounded inside everyone's skull. Then the door opened again. Whitmore stepped out, no longer the commanding figure from moments earlier. He looked like a man pulled back from the edge of a cliff, shoulders slumped, eyes, red hands trembling. He looked at Jonathan, and fear showed plainly across his face. "Mr. Reed," his voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't know." I am sorry," Jonathan rose. Not abruptly, not with intimidation. He simply stood, taking one step toward the shaken captain, like a teacher facing a student who had made a grave mistake. "Mr. Whitmore." Jonathan said, his voice steady, like the heartbeat of someone fully in control. "I will ask you one question. Only one." Whitmore nodded frantically. "If I were not the chairman," Jonathan said slowly, each word pressing into the carpet beneath them, "if I were just an ordinary passenger with no power, no title, what would you have done?" Whitmore opened his mouth. No sound came, because the real answer, the one he carried in his gut, was too horrifying to say aloud. But the cabin knew the answer. Everyone knew. Patterson lowered his head. The woman in 5A wiped away tears. Marcus Brown in 6A nodded not at Jonathan, but at the truth finally spoken by silence. Jonathan looked into Whitmore's eyes, not with anger, but with the exhaustion of someone who had lived this pattern far too many times. "You do not need to know who I am," Jonathan said softly, "to treat me correctly. A long, suffocating silence followed. Then Jonathan stepped back, turned toward the cabin, and spoke clearly, his voice calm, yet carrying terrifying authority. "Yes, I am Jonathan Reed, chairman of Sky West Aviation. And what happened today is why I have conducted Hamoiba undercover audits in the past 6 months." Mark collapsed into his seat as if his legs could no longer support him. Rachel broke into desperate sobs. David Halvorson stood paralyzed like a statue, struck by lightning. Jonathan continued his tone, not loud, but more powerful than any shout. "Because at every airport I pass through, in every cabin I sit in, I am questioned more than any other passenger, simply because of my skin color." He looked around, his gaze falling briefly on Marcus, then Olivia, then the passengers staring down in shame. "And today," Jonathan said, "you have shown me that the problem is not in the paperwork. It is in the way people judge someone before that person even speaks." A cold wind seemed to sweep through the cabin. No one spoke. No one objected. No one dared breathe loudly, because everyone understood. This was no longer an onboard incident. This was the moment an entire system was awakened. And the man who awakened it was standing right in front of them. The moment Captain Whitmore stepped back with a pale face, the entire cabin felt as if someone had pressed a freeze button. The engines outside the window hummed steadily, but inside every sound had died. No one knew exactly what was happening, only that a secret had just cracked open, and whatever came next would upend the entire order of the cabin. Then, beep, the cabin system chimed so sharply that several passengers jolted. All the entertainment screens lit up at once, turning black for a moment, before displaying the Sky West logo, like a verdict being prepared for announcement. A line of text scrolled across the bottom, thickening the air like glue. Connecting to Emergency Board of Directors meeting, Rachel stopped crying. Mark nearly collapsed against the wall. David Halvorson felt his knees soften. Patterson did not blink. Olivia gripped her phone so tightly, her knuckles whitened her live stream, surging past Muay Tamngin viewers, comments flooding like a waterfall. "What is happening? The board is dialing in. Who is that chairman?" The screens flickered again. Then 10 video windows appeared like 10 seats in a Supreme Courtroom. At the center was the stern face of Margaret Foster, chairwoman of the board. Her cold, sharp eyes undimmed even by the screen. "We are in an emergency session," she said, her voice cracking like thunder. "Mr. Reed, we have watched the entire incident." Jonathan remained composed, adjusting his cuff as if preparing for a routine internal review, not a moment determining the fate of an entire crew. He nodded lightly, his expression not triumphant, simply acknowledging that the truth was finally being put in its rightful place. Margaret's gaze cut through the cabin camera as if it pierced the entire aircraft. What we witnessed was a passenger, detained without basis, questioned outside of protocol, threatened with the harshest penalty in aviation, and treated entirely differently from other passengers because of the color of his skin. The entire cabin lowered their heads, even those who had only watched in silence. Margaret turned to Whitmore, who stood frozen like stone. Captain James Whitmore. He swallowed, lips pale. "Oh yes, ma'am. You are suspended immediately, effective this moment. No hesitation. No ambiguity. A single stroke severing 30 years of seniority in 30 seconds. Rachel burst into tears. Mark stumbled back, as if pushed. Patterson stared as though watching a live courtroom drama. Margaret continued, her voice so firm no one dared blink. You threatened a passenger with the no-fly list without cause. You ignored security's verification. You acted based on personal assumptions rather than procedure. This is abuse of authority at the highest level. Whitmore blinked, rapidly fighting tears. I did not know. I truly did not know he was. You did not need to know who he was to treat him correctly, Margaret cut in. You should know that the moment you put on the uniform you are wearing. The cabin sagged under the weight of her words. Those words were not just for Whitmore, but for anyone who had ever chosen silence, who had ever mistaken prejudice for procedure. Margaret shifted to David Halverson, who now trembled like a man falling from 10 stories. David Halverson. You are terminated immediately. David opened his mouth, but no sound came. Margaret continued relentless. You attempted to remove a passenger based on speculation. You encouraged your crew to act with discriminatory intent. You ignored scanner data and security confirmation. And you did all of this with the confidence of someone who believed he would face no consequences. Her final sentence hit like a hammer. Now you will. David collapsed into a seat, strength gone. Margaret turned to Rachel and Mark, standing side by side, shaking like children caught in a serious mistake. Rachel Turner, Mark Ellison. Both of you are suspended immediately. Internal accounts locked. You will report to the Ethics Investigation Division today. Rachel sobbed, and Mark opened his mouth, but no words came. You are not being disciplined for a single mistake. Margaret said, her voice softer, but still sharp. You are being disciplined for a chain of choices, choosing fear and bias over procedure and professionalism. Jonathan looked at Rachel crying, Mark trembling, David vacant, and Whitmore defeated. His eyes held no joy, no vengeance, only sorrow, the sorrow of someone who had lived this too many times to still feel anger. Margaret turned to Jonathan, her voice formal again. Mr. Reed, would you like to say something to everyone? Jonathan stood taking one step into the aisle. Every eye in the cabin locked onto him. Olivia lifted her phone, her live stream surpassing Hai Moi Motenghin viewers. Jonathan took a deep breath. I do not want anyone to lose their job, he said, his voice low, but echoing through the cabin. I am not here to punish anyone. I am here because I have lived through this my entire life. He looked at Rachel, sadness in his eyes. I have been asked questions no one else is asked. He looked at Mark. I have been doubted simply because I do not look like the person they expect to sit here. He looked at Whitmore, who bowed his head. I have been threatened with punishments others never have to hear. Jonathan turned back to the cabin. I do not need apologies. I need change. Silence fell heavy as metal. Margaret nodded. And change begins today. The company will immediately implement the Reed Protocol, including a 48-hour investigation window for all complaints, AI bias detection, for cabin interactions, full crew retraining, and a $10 million fund for passengers affected by discrimination. The cabin felt as if it had witnessed something far larger than a personal incident. It was the pivot of an entire system right in the first-class cabin at ground level before the plane had even left the gate. Olivia lowered her phone to her chest, whispering to her live stream, We just witnessed history. Jonathan returned to seat 2, exhaling softly. No one heard that breath, but it was the final punctuation to the first half of the story and the opening door to an entirely different journey. One small cabin, one moment, one man. And from here, an entire system would begin to change. The moment the board of directors ended the emergency meeting, the cabin screens faded to black and shut off completely, leaving behind a strange silence. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of realization. It felt as though the entire aircraft had just been pulled out of a dream, where everyone had unknowingly become a witness to a truth far larger than themselves. No one spoke for several seconds. Only the hum of the fans, the faint rustle of fabric as passengers shifted in their seats, and the shaky breaths of those who understood they had seen something people would talk about for years. Jonathan Reed sat quietly in seat 2. His hand resting lightly on his knee, eyes lowered to the floor. No one could read what he was thinking, and that was what made him different. He did not celebrate victory. He did not revel in others falling apart. Instead, in his eyes, was the weight of a mon who understood that real change does not come from shouting, but from the moment people finally face their own mistakes. A figure stepped forward. Marcus Brown, the patent attorney from seat 6A, stood beside him, placing a hand on the back of the seat in front. Mr. Reed Marcus said softly, "Thank you for not staying silent." Jonathan looked up with a gentle smile. "I did not do this for myself." "I know," Marcus replied. "I have been." The man asked, "Is that really your ticket?" "More times than I can count. But I did not have the power to make people stop and look at themselves. Today you did something many of us have dreamed about all our lives." Jonathan met Marcus's gaze, and between them was the respect of two men who shared the same invisible scars. "We all have a responsibility," Jonathan said. "I simply have tools that can make them listen." Marcus nodded. "And you used them well." In seat 1, C. Patterson, who had been impatient, annoyed and suspicious earlier, stood and slowly approached. His shoulders shook slightly, like someone seeking redemption. "Mr. Reed," he said, his voice much smaller than usual. I was wrong to think you were the reason for the delay. I was only thinking about my own schedule. I forgot that sometimes people are dealing with things I never have to face." Jonathan turned to him, neither angry nor resentful. "Mr. Patterson," he said, "what matters is not that you were wrong. What matters is that you realized it." Patterson bowed his head, offering perhaps the most sincere apology of his life. Behind him, the woman from seat 5, A, who had shrunk into herself earlier, stepped forward with tears in her eyes. I never speak up when I see things like this happen. I never know what to do. But today, I realized that staying silent is part of the problem." Jonathan gave her a sad smile. "We have all been there. What matters is that tomorrow you will not be silent anymore." Footsteps approached. A new set of flight attendants entered from the jet bridge, 2 women and 1 man, all composed and determined. With them was Captain Laura Anderson, the first black female captain in Sky West, standing tall with steady, resolute eyes. "Good afternoon, everyone," she said, warmly but firmly. "I am Captain Anderson. This flight will continue with complete commitment to respect for every passenger on board." A few people clapped, then a few more. Then the entire cabin joined in. The applause was not for Anderson, not for Jonathan, not for the board. It was for the moment a system changed right before their eyes. When the cabin quieted, Jonathan stood and turned to face everyone. "I want to say one last thing," he began. His voice was not loud, but each word rebounded off the cabin walls and settled in the hearts of everyone present. "I am sorry this flight was delayed. I know you all have places to be, things to do. He paused, scanning the faces, still weighed down by emotion. But the discomfort you felt today, 1 hour, maybe 2, is what millions of people live with their entire lives. No one moved. A few reached for tissues. If today made you uncomfortable, Jonathan continued to carry that feeling with you. Let it remind you. Because when you see someone being treated unfairly, your choice matters. He looked around the cabin, warm yet piercing. You can look away or you can step forward. And sometimes, stepping forward simply means saying, "This is not right." A profound silence followed. Then Patterson clapped, then Marcus, and then the entire cabin erupted into a thunderous applause that echoed off the walls, the seats, the overhead bins, a declaration from a group of strangers that they had witnessed something that would ripple far beyond this flight. Jonathan bowed his head slightly. The storm had passed, but its impact was only beginning. The moment the board of directors ended the emergency meeting, the cabin screens faded and shut off completely, leaving behind an unusual silence. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of awareness. It felt as if the entire aircraft had just been pulled out of a dream in which everyone had unknowingly played the role of witness to a truth far bigger than themselves. No one spoke during the first few seconds. Only the sound of the fans, the soft friction of fabric as passengers shifted, and the trembling breaths of people realizing they had just seen something that would be talked about for years. Jonathan Reed remained seated in 2A, his hand resting gently on his knee, his gaze lowered to the floor. No one could tell what he was thinking, and that was what made him different. He did not celebrate victory, nor did he savor the sight of others falling apart. Instead, his eyes carried the heaviness of someone who understood that change never comes from shouting, but from the moment people finally face their own mistakes. A figure approached. Marcus Brown, the patent attorney from row 6A, stood beside him, placing a hand on the back of the seat in front. Mr. Reed, Marcus said softly, "Thank you for not staying silent." Jonathan looked up and offered a gentle smile. "I didn't do this for myself." "I know," Marcus replied. "I have been the man asked, 'Is that really your ticket?' dozens of times. But I never had the power to make people stop and look at themselves. Today, you did something many of us dreamed of for a lifetime." Jonathan met Marcus's eyes, and between them was the respect of 2 men carrying the same invisible scars. "We all have a responsibility," Jonathan said. "I just happen to have the tools to make them listen." Marcus nodded. "And you used them well." In 1C, Patterson, who had been impatient and judgmental earlier, stood and slowly walked toward Jonathan. His shoulders sagged slightly, as if carrying an unseen weight. "Mr. Reed," he said quietly, "I am sorry. I misjudged you. I thought you were the reason for the delay. But it turns out I was looking through a narrow lens." Jonathan did not frown, did not scold him. "What matters is not that you were wrong, at first," he said, "but that you realized it before it was too late." Patterson could say nothing more and bowed his head. The woman from row 5A stepped forward, next her eyes red. "I was afraid to speak up, but today I realized that my silence was also a wrong choice." Jonathan nodded. "All of us have been silent at some point. What matters is that starting tomorrow, you will not be silent anymore." The aircraft began to descend. The San Diego sky opened up in golden evening light. Marcus asked, "Mr. Reed, what started all of this? What made you go undercover for 23 flights?" Jonathan looked out the window, the sun reflecting on the glass. "My father," he said, his voice lowering into something deeper than the layers of clouds below. In 1987, my father saved for an entire year to buy a first-class ticket for my mother. When they reached the check-in counter, the agent said, "Are you sure this ticket is really yours?" Then called security. They pulled my father aside like a criminal. My mother cried the whole flight. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling that pain like a blade down his spine. "My father passed in 2019, Jonathan continued. He never got to see me build an airline where something like that could never happen again. I wanted him to see today, even if only in spirit." Marcus placed a hand on Jonathan's shoulder, a silent gesture of a man who understood that today was not only about justice, but about legacy. When the wheels touched the ground in San Diego, the cabin trembled lightly. But instead of sighs of exhaustion, the air filled with the relieved exhale of people who had walked through fire together. Jonathan stood before anyone could leave. "I am sorry for delaying the flight," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear, gentle enough for everyone to feel. "But the discomfort you felt today, 1 hour or 2, is what millions endure every day, because they are never sure whether they will be treated fairly." He looked at each face, seeing guilt, shame, and gratitude. Carry that feeling with you, because the next time you see someone treated unfairly, you will remember today, and you will not look away. No one said a word. Then Patterson clapped, Marcus clapped, and soon the entire cabin applauded, not for his title, but for the truth he had spoken. 1 week later, on the 52nd floor of a glass tower, Jonathan stood before a camera, not as a chairman who had been disrespected, but as someone guiding an entire industry. "My name is Jonathan Reed," he said, "and I want to remind you of something. Organizations do not change because they want to. They change because someone forces them to confront themselves." He held up his phone, revealing a new flight booking. "This Tuesday, seat 32B, a competing airline." He smiled. "I will be a regular passenger again, and they will show the world who they truly are." Jonathan looked into the lens one last time. No matter where you sit, no matter who you are, respect is not a privilege. It is a right, and it is our duty to protect it. The screen faded to black, leaving only 3 white lines. Respect is not something you beg for. It is a right, and we must protect it. The revolution did not start on the ground. It started inside cabin 2190, and now it is spreading across the sky. From the perspective of an expert in organizational culture and power dynamics, Jonathan Reed's story reveals a truth that many large systems avoid. Confronting prejudice does not show itself in the most important decisions. It appears in the smallest, most ordinary moments, when someone with authority believes they are interacting with just a regular person. It is in those moments that the true culture of an organization is exposed. And what is worth noting is this meaningful change does not come from punishment. It comes from the first person who dares to stand up and reveal where the system has gone wrong. Sky West did not change because Jonathan is the chairman. They changed because Jonathan forced the entire organization to witness itself through cameras, through the live stream, through the raw emotions of dozens of people inside that small aircraft cabin. When an organization is willing to look into its own shadows, that is when real light begins. If this story resonates with you, please like the video, to help spread the message of fairness and courage, and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next journeys where the truth always finds its voice. Before you leave the video, comment exactly 3 words: honor, respect, always.